Question 71. Let's start with question 71. In the ER data model, what does an entity represent? The correct answer is option D, a real-world object or concept. An entity in the ER data model represents a real-world object or concept that can be uniquely identified and described in the database. Examples of entities could be student, employee, product, etc. Entities have attributes that describe their properties. Question 72. Now, moving on to question 72. What is a relationship in the ER data model? The correct answer is option C, a connection between two entities. A relationship in the ER data model represents a connection or association between two or more entities. It describes how entities interact or relate to each other. Relationships are typically represented by lines connecting entities in an ER diagram. Question 73. Let's explore question 73. In an ER diagram, what does a diamond shape represent? The correct answer is option C, relationship. A diamond shape in an ER diagram represents a relationship between entities. The diamond shape contains the name of the relationship, which describes how the connected entities are related. Question 74. Now, for question 74, what is cardinality in the context of an ER diagram? The correct answer is option D, the number of instances in a relationship. Cardinality in an ER diagram refers to the number of instances or entities that can participate in a particular relationship. It specifies the minimum and maximum number of entities that can be involved in the relationship, such as one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. Question 75. Let's proceed to question 75. Which of the following is an example of an attribute in the ER data model? The correct answer is option C, age. An attribute in the ER data model represents a property or characteristic of an entity. Age is an example of an attribute that could be associated with an entity like person or student. Question 76. Now, let's tackle question 76. What is the purpose of a primary key in the ER data model? The correct answer is option B, to uniquely identify an entity instance. The primary key in the ER data model is a unique identifier for each instance of an entity. It ensures that each entity instance can be uniquely identified within the database. Primary keys are essential for maintaining data integrity and for establishing relationships between entities. Question 77. Moving on to question 77. In an ER diagram, what is a weak entity? The correct answer is option A, an entity with a weak primary key. A weak entity is an entity that cannot be uniquely identified using its attributes alone. It depends on another entity, referred to as the owner entity, for its identification. A weak entity has a weak primary key, which includes the primary key of the owner entity as part of its own key. Question 78. Now, let's tackle question 78. What is an associative entity in the ER data model? The correct answer is option D, an entity that mediates a many-to-many relationship. An associative entity is an entity that is introduced to mediate a many-to-many relationship between other entities. It represents the relationship itself and may have attributes that pertain to the relationship. Associative entities are used to resolve many-to-many relationships into two one-to-many relationships. Question 79. For question 79, in an ER diagram, what does a double line between entities indicate? The correct answer is option D, many-to-many relationship. A double line between entities in an ER diagram represents a many-to-many relationship. This indicates that multiple instances of one entity are associated with multiple instances of another entity. A many-to-many relationship is typically resolved using an associative entity. Question 80. Finally, let's wrap up with question 80. Which type of relationship represents a situation where an entity is linked to itself? The correct answer is option D, recursive. A recursive relationship in the ER data model occurs when an entity is related to itself. For example, in an employee entity, an attribute like manager ID could establish a recursive relationship where employees are connected to their respective managers within the same entity.